This video is sponsored by War Thunder. It's just before 8 p.m. on February 22nd, 1940, as the German destroyer Liberecht Maas is struck by an air attack. Breaking in half from the damage, she would be joined less than 10 minutes later by the Max Schultz, sparking chaos among the rest of the flotilla and resulting in over 600 German sailors lost to the waves. However, the part which makes this the most embarrassing defeat for the Kriegsmarine is the fact that this attack was carried out not by a British force, but by a group of German bombers. For a nation highly regarded for their use of radios, how could such a disaster not be avoided by communication between units? Join me as we explore the story of Operation Wikinger. The tragic events of Operation Wikinger, or Operation Viking as I will refer to it for the remainder of this video, were unintentionally set in motion hours before a single bullet was fired. At around 6 p.m., Heinkel 111 bombers of the 4th Squadron of the 26th Bomber Group lift off from an airfield in Neumünster, Germany, bound for the North Sea. Their mission? To sink any British ship they can find in order to disrupt shipping. Although really, that event still wasn't the first domino to fall, as earlier in the month, another factor of that night's events were contributed by British ships which laid mines in the area. These two completely unconnected events would result in the perfect storm for the unsuspecting sailors aboard the 6 German destroyers who left Wilhelmshaven that fateful day. Communication records between the two show that while neither side had properly informed the other of their plans, there had been enough information exchanged to potentially warn one or both of them. In fact, the Kriegsmarine directly requested air support from the Luftwaffe twice in the form of a recon flight and fighter escort. The bomber wing similarly informed Marine Group West of their planned mission, but this was not forwarded to the destroyers. The final chance to warn the destroyers came just as the bombers were setting off on their mission when Major Martin Harlenhauser noticed a request from Marine Group West for assistance from their bombers to cover the returning destroyers the following morning. Though he did make a call asking about the destroyers in the area, by that point it was too late to warn the bomber crews. A message could have been sent to the destroyers by the Kriegsmarine, but once again, this was not done. At this point, the fate of all involved was now sealed. Before we go through the fateful events of that night, I want to give a big thanks to the sponsor of this video, War Thunder. War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, available for free on PC, consoles, and mobile devices. In fact, thanks to this and the detailed vehicle models and realistic graphics, part of this video will show a reenactment of some of the events recreated using in-game footage. Along with the HE-111 and German destroyers, you'll find over 2,500 tanks, aircraft, and ships from over 10 nations around the world, stretching from the 1920s all the way to modern day. Join the over 95 million other players already playing in PvP battles today using my links in the description or pinned comment to start playing for free on your PC, consoles, or mobile device. PC and consoles will also get a special bonus to get you started, including premium vehicles and an exclusive vehicle decoration. This is also available to anyone who has played previously but hasn't played in the past 6 months. Huge thanks to them for sponsoring. Now let's get back into the story of Operation Viking. Leaving from Wilhelmshaven, the 6 ships under the command of Fritz Berger were tasked with investigating British fishing boats in the North Sea suspected of being secretly used for military purposes. Air reconnaissance from the Luftwaffe had reported the boats near Dogger Bank, around 60 miles (97 kilometers) from England's coast. Dubbed Operation Viking, the destroyers Friedrich Eckholt, Richard Beitzen, Erich Kollner, Theodor Riedel, Max Schultz, and Liberecht Maas set sail that afternoon and entered the German Westwall minefield at around 7 p.m. bound for their mission area. They were still making their way through this known safe passage in the frigid waters of the minefield when at 7:13, the sound of a twin-engined plane was heard passing overhead of the line of destroyers. An identification of the aircraft in the dark proved impossible even as it turned and passed back over the ships for a second time before briefly disappearing. About 8 minutes later, though, the sound would return and both the Richard Beitzen and the Erich Kollner began firing their 20mm AA guns at the unidentified aircraft. Inside the bombers, the airmen had been flying for around 2 hours when the wake of a ship was spotted in the dark water. Turning to pursue, the pilots and crew watched as the shadowy silhouette forming the wake continued to cut through the waves, turning to make a second pass. Still unable to identify the ship, but suspecting it to be a freighter, the bomber turned again to make a final pass. This time, the darkness lit up as anti-aircraft fire from not one but 2 ships attempted to target them, with the gunners returning fire with their machine guns. With both the Kriegsmarine and Luftwaffe unaware they were firing at each other, the battle had officially begun. Targeting the rearmost ship, the HE-111, commanded by Feldwebel Jäger, released a first salvo of 4 50-kilogram bombs above the Liberecht Maas at 7:46 p.m., with one striking the midsection of the ship. In response, all 6 ships began desperately painting the sky with AA fire. Aboard the Maas, all hell had broken loose as it took immediate evasive actions, turning to starboard as a distress call was sent. With the other 5 destroyers turning back to aid their damaged comrade, the bomber crew also turned, another 4 bombs ready to drop. Releasing this final attack and confirming 2 hits, they turn back home, making their escape into the night unscathed. Below them, though, the sailors do not share this luck, as these strike the already wounded vessel at 7:58 to violent effect, sealing her fate as she begins her descent into the dark waters with her crew of over 300 German sailors. Already alongside the sinking ship, the Erich Kollner began preparing for rescue operations as a final massive explosion south of the Maas rocked the flotilla. The Max Schultz had just been dealt a lethal blow and would join the Maas on the bottom of the North Sea, taking all hands with her. To make things worse, this caused further panic among the 4 remaining undamaged destroyers, with reports of phantom submarines and torpedoes. For about half an hour, this continued, with the flotilla scouring the sea for a submarine that wasn't there as the cold water claimed more and more lives. Some rescued sailors were even lost to the sea when the Erich Kollner accidentally capsized a boat it was towing by accelerating quickly. By the time Fritzberger issued the order canceling the mission to return to port, only 60 of the crew from the Maas were able to be recovered. In total, Operation Viking resulted in a loss of 2 Type 1934 destroyers and 578 lives, making it the most costly friendly fire incident of the war for Germany. This still leaves us with unanswered questions, though, including how could this have happened in the first place? Despite the Germans making widespread use of radios in the different branches of their military, communication between these branches was far from an open channel. This embarrassment was a perfect example of this, with neither the Kriegsmarine nor the Luftwaffe properly communicating with one another about where they had operations underway. A simple heads up by either party ahead of time could have completely avoided this tragedy, but instead it only furthered the animosity between the two. Post-war findings have also attributed the loss of the Max Schultz to one of the British mines mentioned at the start of the video, although it could have also been a German mine. Assessments of the events immediately after the fact were unable to assign blame to either party, as neither of them had done anything wrong. The sailors had been attacked by an aircraft they couldn't identify, and similarly, the bomber was under orders to target ships in that area with no knowledge of friendly ships currently operating there. The fault was not with any of the men involved, but rather with the infighting between higher-ups in the chain of command. In fact, you could argue a large part of the problem was the fact that Hermann Goering refused to give up any part of his Luftwaffe to the Kriegsmarine. This meant that the German Navy had practically no aircraft of its own, unlike the British or American militaries, which split their air force between the Army and Navy. This obviously allows for better communication, just like having someone's phone number makes it easier to contact them than if you had to rely on reaching out to a mutual friend whenever you had a question for them. This lack of cooperation between the Luftwaffe and Kriegsmarine would continue for the remainder of the war, no doubt only serving to make the ever-worsening war effort that much worse for Hitler's war machine. But what do you think? Was Operation Viking a tragic accident or a disaster, with the only ones to blame not receiving a trial for their hand in these avoidable deaths until after the war was over? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and don't forget to try out War Thunder on your PC, console, or mobile devices using my links in the description and pinned comment. All new players and returning players who haven't played in 6 months on PC and consoles will get that special bonus I mentioned earlier. Huge thanks again to them for sponsoring. If you liked this video and want to see more like it, consider checking out our previous ones on other stories involving the Kriegsmarine. See you there or on the next episode of Sales and Salvos.